Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. We are back in the house. Welcome back to Mad Poet Podcast. I am your host, Alex Murdoch, the Mad Poet, and we are here to revisit another rabbit hole, as if you will. Um, Lots to unpack, and thanks for everyone for supporting the platform and giving us a chance to express our thoughts and share with the ethos what we think of it and what we interpret of what it puts out there. Here with a good friend of mine, Strings. Shout out Strings Theory. He's got his platform on the go at the moment. Building as we do. How you doing, Strings?
I'm good, man. Grateful to be here. And yeah, shout out everyone trying to deal with the strike right now. Crazy. So yeah.
Yeah, yes indeed, yes indeed. Um, you mentioned you couldn't see the title.
No.
I would imagine people on the outside can see it, but it's a point of no return is the title.
Mm.
Point of no return. But let me start with a piece.
Yes, sir.
This is the piece for today. Just give me a second. All right, this is it. To never tell about the time would be the ultimate crime. Otherwise, how would I realign? Tell these climbs with a knee brace in mind, like I'm about to slide. In a terrible fight, like the moments I've got my hide in a plight. Mad poet, the humpback growing on the inside. I'm feeling the lump like they're about to take over my mind, but never mind. Grabbing for the highs, though my life looks in demand for respite. I could never live such days for too long as a sad song. I need to keep on, keep going like the moving tracks have my mind. So I'm running for so long, like a spine ship in mine. The inclines have my realign, speaking, tweaking. I'm talking to me, myself, and I, destabilized, like looking in a minute, like give a second. I might find my mind. Yep, that's me done for the.
Cold.
So that was the quote for today,
Mm.
and ultimately, where am I going with this? Um, I think over the years, or just through our experience, I'm sure it's without a doubt where you've been into such a situation, and that's what I really want to explore today. Those type of situations, and let me explain what I'm talking about. Um, it could be you yourself, or what you've observed, but you've witnessed situations where people have been in situations that they cause onto themselves, cause, um, or they cause for others. But whatever the situation is, the pinnacle of what I'm focusing on is ultimately the point of no return, where they're convinced that whatever they do, they would never be able to live this down, make up for it. The regret is so immense that I can never change the perception of what this is. This is ever going to be a terrible thing or a taboo in a sense where
Okay.
I can never, do you get what I mean, realign because this is such a tumultuous thing. It's hard to change it. And perhaps, if we could come up with some examples once we sort of kind of go into it. That's ideally what I was thinking about. You have any thoughts?
Yeah. Um, Man, it's a very interesting one because it's that thin line between making mistakes and uh, what actions or way of being or how you see life could be
Mm,
considered you crossing that line. So each, I think the line will be like crossing it will can be broken down into different categories of what it could be. I one would be um what you believe in. People would be like, oh, such a great guy, but X, Y, and Z. Um, the obvious would be certain acts, um, and especially if there isn't enough remorse,
mm,
I think. Because I'm not, with that, I'm more thinking about like things that really test and challenge you,
yeah.
as opposed to.
Yes. Let me just jump in there. To your point, that's exactly what I was thinking about. So I guess we're going for the extremes today. I mean, for example, that you've seen certain situations where somebody's committed um, the ultimate crime, murder, certain situations like that, whether it's a movie or real life, and perhaps you yourself also convinced this person could never change his life around, you know, and that's where I'm heading with this. Like, what does that look like? How does somebody handle that? That's such a mountain on your head to carry. Do you get what I mean? Like, and I would say for me personally, I would say one of the primal things that people face in such a situation is probably self hate.
Mm,
Self hate because the guilt. At the end of the day, no matter how cold you think you are on the outside, you still got conscience. You're still human. You're still um you're still fallible. Do you get what I mean? There's no
yeah.
such thing as like, oh man, a stone person. There's a perception of one, of course, but
Okay.
at the end of the day, when the lights are out, like, how do you, like, who are you, sort of things, and how does that make you feel? How do you cope with your situation? What does that look like? You know, and
Yeah.
that's sort of like where I'm at with it.
Okay.
You know.
So if we stick to the extremes, I still I'm on the page that it's case by case
Mm,
because what I was gonna say is that it's easy to just single out or um he did this, the like the ones that are i.e. newsworthy, like those are more black and white,
yeah.
because they don't require that much of a test to see if you can push through, because I believe in the notion, again, varies, that a man can change himself
Mm,
enough to learn from, i.e., mistake, um, especially with the extremes, because as I always mention on the platform, that we're full of conundrums, man, and the
yeah.
heavier the case, obviously, the heavier the torment. But um, there's someone out there. I said this earlier um, to a friend of mine, that
Yeah.
there's always someone that's gone through what you have, if not worse. And some
Absolutely.
of them, they managed to come over, um, not get over it, but they managed to find a way to live with themselves and still um, atone for their actions.
Yeah.
So, and again, with the extreme cases, um, there's still some light because, i.e., murder, we want to do that one first.
Yeah.
Self-defense, that's always a tricky one. It will eat you up, but initially, if you're defending someone you love or your property or whatever, then it's like, hey, that's kind of instinct for you to say, hey, I've warned you. Um, you start to process quickly what laws are of the land that you live in before you make that action. If someone does ignore all that and hurt you, then going to court allows you to then say, hey, we all agree that what took place is a bit shocking, but what does the individual have to say about what led them to commit said action? Because again,
Mm.
if that was the case, it would be lawless for people to say, "Oh, you did this. In you go, mate." It's like, wait, what? Like, do you know what I mean? Um,
Mm.
but ooh, should we do it? Should we do it? All right, I'm gonna not mentioning names. But um, when men are on the stand, especially publicly for actions that there's no official verdict yet.
Mm.
Those are always interesting because naturally, again, that's that one. In fact, yeah, let's do that one because immediately someone will say he doesn't deserve to see, um, he deserves to be under the jail, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Initially, um, certain people will say this shouldn't be a case where you have to explain um, your circumstances. Then it's like, okay, um, a lot of emotion will cause someone to say, well, this is heinous. We shouldn't need any further proof before we conduct any form of legal punishment, so to speak. Then it's like, well, this is why we have this system in place to determine what actually took place and to get the evidence to say we agree or we don't agree. But lately,
Yeah.
with the access to the internet and news being like the express highway, um, the most recent thing um, that comes with men that go through these different circumstances is the fair warning is like as soon as you are attributed with such a claim against you, the case is always if you are on a certain stature of visibility, please avoid um, entertaining or being in an environment that just determines for you to just say um, it's not gonna look good for you regardless of what happens. Um, so yeah, I'll end on that. What do you think?
It's crazy because there's there's so many ways to kick it, right? In terms of like the way you see it and the way that people see it as well, like ourselves. Um, but I've grown to understand that there's two things at play here. There's there's the black and white. There's the nuanced,
Hmm.
but at the same time there's the representative of such, right? What I mean by that is I'll give you examples. So you have the situation and you have the perception of the situation.
Yes.
So, for example, a man can change, but if he doesn't change his perception as well, then you may argue to everybody else his efforts are wasted. Do you get what I mean? It's pointless because they'll never see him
I.e., the remorse in the situation. Yeah.
correct. They'll never see him in a different light.
Hmm.
Which it begs the question, and sometimes I suppose it's somewhat of a corrupt inclined outlook on society. And what I mean by that is the fact that with this knowledge being apparent, right, to everybody like ourselves, it begs the question that are we seeing a perception of change for the most part with most people? Or are we actually seeing change itself? Do you get where I'm coming from?
Uh, break that down, please.
Yes. So this is what I mean. Anybody can play or act a role, just like they can act a role, or in terms of saying that doing the right things at the right time in front of the right people, coerce the media, coerce the limelight, whatever, to just show form,
Mm,
as in like this is who I am, etc.
yeah.
To sort of placate this narrative or this idea that I am this person now. I am no longer who I used to be. I killed that person, figuratively speaking.
Yes.
But
Mm,
when the doors are closed and when there's nobody watching or looking, this is a cold-blooded person. Like like it's literally it's so bad where it's split personality. It's liver
yeah.
boy. And I've read books where these type of people. I give you a perfect example because I know you like stuff like this. Um, uh, what's it called? Equalizer. And so there was a clip I was watching, sort of kind of like
Mm,
behind the scenes sort of thing, and they were sort of kind of breaking down the psyche of the type of person that the character that Denzel was supposed to be playing. The psyche of somebody like that, the killer, etc. And ultimately, the point I'm trying to make is sort of like flipping a switch when they get into their mode, right? And it's sort of like you said, you going into Matrix and anything you see, anything like your environment is your weapon. Ultimately, is what I'm trying to say,
mm,
and that's the way they
yeah.
think when they're in that sort of mode. But these are we're talking about like professional killers, and this is what he was. This is the type of person he was playing. But when he's not in that mode, he's the most forthcoming, relaxed sort of person you could ever meet. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's somewhat the exact um, persona or caricature of what we're speaking about to the T, but at the same time, it is somewhat similar. Why? Because there's a perception at play here. He's one person when the situation fits this person, but when it changes to a somewhat different terrain that demands something totally different,
Yeah.
he flips that switch. And so, going back to our situation now, when we're speaking about people in society, which I think is somewhat more intentional, purposeful, premeditated, in a sense where they purposefully are blurring the lines between, well, creating lines, I would say, to begin with, or perception of showing that there are lines that they are not willing to cross anymore because they crossed them before, which is the reason why they're in this situation in the first place. But now they're showing that, you know what, these lines are not ever going to be crossed by me because I've learned my lesson. I am a person that follows the law. I love people. I'm the Care Bear type, etc., etc., all that type of thing. But when the lights are out, when the cameras are cut,
Mm.
it's almost like a switch in itself. And these people are somewhat darkness personified. So, brings you back to my question: black and white situations or black and white perceptions?
Both, depending on the situation. And um, and I'm glad I said what I said in the beginning because when it's more complicated, it requires a higher level of um, ability to read perception to get to an outcome, which is, i.e., somewhat truth to see through um,
Hmm.
what someone is going through. Um, with the title in mind, No Point of Return. Um, there's just there's so many ways to look at it. It's really fascinating because society, people closest to you, um, they all play a part into what you think about on top of yourself as well, and
Yeah.
those little demons in your head that will egg you on um, to make you see yourself and the situation in a way that would make you think um, however you need to think or feel pertaining to it. Um, whereas when it's more easier going, then uh, and people are involved, it's easier for it to be black and white. Example, an incident that happened in Liverpool a few months
Hmm.
ago. Um, everyone was hungry for details about the court. In fact, people act like um, the fact that I even mentioned it just shows how quickly society moves on from it because of the person responsible for it. When at the time people wanted questions and to find possible motive regarding. And ooh, here's a funny take. Even if we look at the individual that caused that very, you know what? Yeah, very tragic tragic incident. Society could possibly no. Let me try and rephrase this, and I might need your help as well. But because of that person's nature and status in society, it would help that person to sleep at night because of the perception being controlled to some level
Hmm.
of degree. So then it would thus beg the question: are they human? How can they sleep at night? Because everyone just forget about it despite those immediately close to him applying pressure about what was the reason behind it. So outside looking in, black and white, um, but individually without much detail until the person gets interviewed and said, "Why did you really do that?" Then there'd be more of a chance to give what kind of notion you can give to the individual about what they did.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's it's an intriguing thing because for me, the biggest thing, or one of the fascinating thing for me is the human experience behind it, and the function, how we function, how we sort of kind of reflect in these moments to show who we truly are. And I always find situations like these are very telling when it comes to sort of understanding who somebody truly is. But for the most part, from what I understand, especially in these times, people are so great at hiding. People love to hide. And I mean, love to hide who they are. And I think that's one of the situations why we end up in so many scrapes or, unfortunate situations because people are constantly trying to hide or they've neglected the work so long that they no longer want people to see what they haven't been doing until they've finally got around to doing it or got the urge or the itch to scratch this situation and correct it, rectify it about themselves. And that's what I mean when I say hide. I'm merely speaking about their how they see themselves or a facet of who they are. They don't want anybody to witness this or see it until they're happy with what they see themselves. And so they'll do anything to to avoid or obstruct somebody having a vision or a sight of what this is. But sometimes this thing is a monster. Sometimes this thing is scary. Sometimes this thing is cannibalistic.
The ability to hide,
You know
or
what they're trying to hide.
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why we hide it. But yeah, don't know if you finished your point.
Now, I'm just saying that sometimes this thing is gross in the face.
Oh,
Sometimes this thing
mm,
it tells a tale.
definitely.
Like, mm,
But that's what makes us interesting, man. You know me, I'm always gonna say that because,
period.
um, like, and ooh, shout out to the knowledge, man. Um, okay, this one's for you then,
Go.
because madness is fascinating in itself because a large portion of it is um, a willingness to control an aspect of you that if you let run wild can cause havoc. But
Hmm.
the havoc that it causes, one can argue that um, if it runs too wild, it can develop a level of intelligence to um, be clever in its trickery, to exercise whatever fun, and it's been practiced and documented and turned into films on with different characters. So, with that being said, um, the hiding I've learned is a survival tool
Mm,
for good reason because we wouldn't be who we are if we didn't have somewhat of a filter or control over the emotions or the monsters within us that dictate how we feel, or i.e., what they feel, and make us feel in that regard. So, yes, the and oh man, and now I'm thinking about it, and it's always been privy to it, but the conversation makes me think about it even more. Perception is a large portion of what this life is. Some do say that it's larger than what we've been made to believe, and I heavily support those arguments because um, some can see what are hiding better than others, which thus gives you the ability to be careful or be more cautious about how to be around people, especially in the form of exchange. And an example I laughed at earlier to myself while he was talking was work.
Yeah.
It's the man. It's a playground, um,
Mm.
the biggest playground. Of if you show who you are too much, it can get you in trouble, which is wild. But it's business because we all have to wear this. We all have to understand this level of perception very well, or well enough, for you to not only get paid, but to work with other beings that may be, I
Mm.
say, you God knows what they do when they get home. Some people will scream, "Never hang out with your work colleagues," and some will say, "I met the love of my life at work." So it just really depends on, like you said, the level of work an individual does on how to see clearer on um, the individuals that they come across. Because naturally, experience will teach some. Hence, you gravitate towards them at your workplace, i.e., I've been here for a very long time. I've seen it all, and they have, and as they should.
Mm.
And how they maneuver in that workplace explains it before they even say a word. So
Yeah.
naturally, that's you being privy to some form of awareness of perception for you to say, okay, I can read this person's body language enough for me to understand
Yeah.
that you are someone who you shouldn't be, you should have more respect for, or they've been around the block a few times, as they say. So,
Mm. That sounds like to me like workplace hiding, and I'll explain that in a minute. But going from the first thing you said, um, perception is somewhat interchangeable. Meaning, the viewpoint is somewhat like a spectrum, and this is why you going back to people hiding. But obviously, survival is important as well. So yes, if you're hiding for survival or certain extremes to that degree, of course. But then that brings into question balance. Or we just said the line, right? The line, having a line is somewhat like having balance or like a code, maybe even a creed. But at the same time, I think we're somewhat, when we say hide, I guess, or when I say hide, I guess I'm speaking about when it is too extreme in sense where like it's off balance, it's unbalanced.
yeah,
And these type of people are more the people that I think are so they hide so much that becomes unhealthy.
yes.
Um,
Mm.
I mean, you just gave a perfect example. You talk about workplace balance. And as we know, there's a lot of situations that goes on in the workplace that if their partner or their spouse was somewhat privy to what was going on, these people would, or if they were watching, things taking place in the workplace. A lot of these people wouldn't do half the things that goes on in the workplace. Let's be real about that. But on the flip of the coin, there are some people that wouldn't care and would still do it anyway.
Hmm.
But what does that mean? That means there's people that would be watching that couldn't do anything about it. So what does that mean? That means there's actually people that hide in plain sight as well. And what do I mean by that? So just stay in this premise with me.
Hmm.
You have people at workplace being watched by their spouse, but they don't care what they do. So they're still doing the nasty, still having affairs, etc. Despite their spouse watching them, knowing that when they go home, there's nobody to keep them in check. There's nobody to somewhat hold them accountable for the situation. Now, if I'm your spouse and I see my partner doing all this madness, and I know I'm not going to do, and she knows for a fact I'm not going to do anything about it. Now, you tell me, isn't that some form of hiding by myself to not actually do something about that?
Man, what answer do you want? You want the short, medium, you want the brother? Um, Again, it's gonna have to come back to the individual, but short answer would be one would only naturally assess that person's level of self-respect, which would then tie to what they would show in order to address. Because it will get to the point largely where people around them would be like, all right, we have been conditioned to understand that this level of behavior being unchecked is somewhat abnormal and it will start to affect those around them. But we would still know not to say anything because that is not our place, which is what makes society somewhat interesting because we understand these unspoken rules of when or what not to say, especially when it comes between two people who have made an agreement to each other. Um, but eventually, people will naturally assume that yeah, this isn't going to last long, and it's an outburst waiting to happen. And that outburst again would be yeah. Let's take it this way. That outburst would be what the individual would be hiding or suppressing and it will affect his life quality, his health, and his relationship with himself. So his point of return would be the outburst where he says, "You know what, Sandra, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore." Um, he might break some stuff. He might hit her. They might scrap, or he might say a lot of things because that level of perception will squeeze the individual to say, "Look, um, this is getting too much," and it might just put that person in the corner to say it's now or never. So it'd be another form of survival, but it would be on the offensive to say, "Look, um, the more that I don't let this out, the more it will have a very negative impact on me." So
Hmm.
the point of return again would be um, after all that happening from both sides, the partner running around um, doing the nasty, as you said. Um,
Nasty.
yeah, and the individual that is on the receiving end of it. One could look at how they both would um, address the action that took place, because the person that has the outlash, that has the outburst, after that they've calmed down, they might say, I've never done that in my life.
Mm.
It was so outside of myself, and I feel embarrassed, ashamed, um, despite, again, public perception saying, oh, you did the right thing, you stood up for yourself. But because it was so rash and just borderline chaotic for that person, depending on how they process that, they might make a vow to themselves to never speak like that again, or something to help them cage that thing that possessed them to do that in the first place. And the and Sandra, um,
Yeah.
it'd be the opposite notion, of wow, like I never knew they had that in them to create such a scene. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because what you're saying about um, the equalizer example is borderline um, of a psychopathic trait,
Yeah.
and them and narcissists have very in common, and what they develop to use over time to their advantage is how to control the perception of themselves to others. So
Mm.
Sandra might say, oh, this is affecting, how people see me, even if it's already in the trash. But they might want to control that situation in order to appease themselves, the monster, or they might flick the switch and play victim and say, oh, wow, you know, I never get any attention at home. This is what you've driven me to. Um, Again, i.e., form of survival to not have to face any true consequence about um, or the limelight that has been given. So, um, yeah. And when it settles, uh, they may both feel there's no point of return, but it depend on if there is remorse on
Yeah.
one end or both, for again that public perception again, for them to determine, is this worth is this enough for people to just say, you know what, um yeah, things happen, cool. um but even as I'm saying it, the word public perception is itself is so interesting, because it's like it really does play a part in um one's level of life. If we're Because one could be a maverick and say, yeah, I stand up for this, but it's like, mate, who you talking to? Like, you are addressing an audience at the end of the day. So if you don't have some level of balance and compassion, then it will be harder for you to get your message across, regardless. Um, and that's where, like you said, balance plays into it. So
You know, I'm not sure if you know this guy called Kristen Coleman. He's a he's a sprinter for the US,
let's see.
and
Oh no, one of the new boys. Okay.
he's been about um, when Bolt was the last championship that Bolt did. I think he was there.
Hmm.
I think he was there with Wells or whatnot. But anyways, Crystal Coleman is a he's a champ, world indoors champ, and he's won he's won medals. He's been about for a little bit now. The only reason I brought him up is because it pertains to this topic we're having.
Hmm.
But his partner is another sprinter called Shakari Richardson.
Ah.
So I just want to tap into that a little bit.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, you probably seen the video
In
of
the
them having
airport, right? Or something.
yeah, the airport, and she was, you know, she was on one. She was going ape on him,
Mm.
and he just stood back. He didn't, and even when the police came, he still sort of kind of evaded, evasive maneuvers. He didn't answer any questions, and he lied about the situations. Despite the fact that they had videos, I'm sure they probably had suspicions that there was actual videos of the whole situation that took place. That's neither here nor there. But I suppose I brought that up because I'm thinking to myself, does self-respect correlate to people hiding?
Yes,
You know, and not to say that it's a bad thing, but I would imagine it's a two-way thing.
absolutely.
Sometimes to
Just
your
gonna say that.
advantage, sometimes to mine. It's a tricky one.
It is.
It's a tricky one. So I guess what I'm saying is somewhat perception is a chameleon type of situation, or hiding in itself is a chameleon, very situational, and I think people monopolize this whole thing, especially perception as
Ooh,
such,
strong
in
word.
such a way,
Mm-hmm.
and but it does tie into what we're saying about in terms of point of no return, because I'm thinking to myself, perception or reality, which is more powerful?
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, which is more powerful because it seems to me like a lot of times, like for example, it seems to me like people are more prone to believe the lie than they are the truth in this everyday society, right? So it stands to reason that perception is clearly more powerful than it is than the real. Because more times you tell people the real, they want to hear the perceptive part, the lie,
Yeah. Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to the truth. Because I suppose in their mind it's more feasible that it's this way, which it don't make any sense, or it's sort of next to impossible, as opposed to that way, which is totally plausible. So there is a question behind that, whereas perception or reality, which is more powerful? And I give another example,
Mm.
and this would be more a female thing.
It's
There's
21 hours.
there's always been a thing about promiscuity.
Yeah.
Going back to consistent with what we just spoke about, but is it the promiscuity in itself, or is it the perception of promiscuity? And what I mean by that is, in reality, I don't think certain females mind being promiscuous. But in the ethos, if it's ordained or if it's portrayed that they're promiscuous, that's a problem.
Absolutely.
That's a problem. So, ultimate question is, strings, perception or reality, which is more powerful?
Reality is, but recently the I would say from larger aspects of um, the system's ability to engineer perception
Mm.
has essentially waged a war on reality. Because perception is natural, but what it aids or masquerade around is reality.
Hmm.
Hence, such statements live on through time and millennia is, um, eventually the dark must come to light. So,
Yeah.
um, because of that, um, don't play perception because, like, um, reality only serves mostly the individual. Hence, what you said earlier about once they go home, shut the curtains, they have to deal with that. And those who understand how powerful that is um,
Yeah.
are more careful with, or try to be more careful with that being in mind. But perception, if woven um, with bad intentions,
Yeah.
it can be very, very nasty.
Mm.
Thus making your reality worse. Huh?
You ever seen we just use movies for this one, but obviously it's a common thing. You
Bro,
ever seen those
sorry.
movies? Go
Hmm.
on.
Them bells are ringing.
Oh, you can hear it,
Yo, crazy.
yeah? Yeah, man. They go hard in the paint, man. I swear.
Yeah.
Every
At
night.
this time. What?
Well, certain nights. But when they do it, yeah, yeah. It's like that. And they
So
take breaks and then they come back.
yeah, that's mad. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, man. But I was gonna say,
Mm,
you've seen those movies before where, the mother will put the kids to bed and it will be like, oh man, she having a great day at work. She's probably a nurse or something.
mm,
Father's not about, and everything is lit, everything is alive, everything is great. Perception is beautiful. But as soon as she put sing the kids to bed, maybe read them a story, then go back downstairs, have a meal, come have a shower,
mhm.
go back to her room, lock doors, relax, close the curtains, and all you can hear is sobbing, cries, and tears, watery pillows, and because you know that's when reality takes over.
Yeah.
And the the fact of the matter is things are not all right. Your health is not doing great because you're doing too much.
Mhm.
Your job is not holding up because your finances in ruins because you don't make enough to support yourself because you're only one person. Yes, you love what you do, but it's not
Ah,
taking care of everybody. You know, your feet hurt, you're putting on weight, and you need to figure things out. Now, you need to figure things out, but for 3 years or so, you've been delaying figuring things out. So in essence, at this point, you're hiding. You're in a bad place, and there's nobody to save you but yourself. But you're too busy saving somebody, saving people during the day, and then saving um, your family or your son or your daughter at night. So it's a sacrifice. Perhaps it's a sacrifice you're willingly making, but at the same time, it's a sacrifice, and that means your time is ticking. and one day it will run out in one way or the other. So again, this is just the the play of perception and reality. You let one person see something while you're looking at the real thing. It's all sunshines and rainbows for the child, but it's pure rainfalls and dark clouds for you.
Yeah,
And that's a powerful thing. But at the
yeah.
end of the day, it's a sacrifice, isn't it?
Mm.
It's a sacrifice. Um, and the idea of self-respect is somewhat of a chameleon to me, I think sometimes. But maybe perhaps it can be somewhat converted into forms of perception in itself, where I might not respect myself, but give me time, I will. I'll do the right thing. I'll do right by me.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
I think it's a tricky thing, man. Maybe, as you said, respect is on a spectrum, sort of like self-esteem to a degree,
Yeah.
which is very peculiar in this world we live in. Because you'd imagine, and it's somewhat maybe in this day and age, it is somewhat undervalued. Respect, self-respect, undervalued.
Um,
And it does beg the question, does the average person have self-esteem issues?
many percent.
Mm.
They're making drugs to help with it. Um, but I say that to say um, that over time, it's been broadcasted heavily for self-respect to be built on something that isn't sustainable, and therein lies the issues. Because life is going to happen. We're going to go through rough times. Um, Females are going to be in those situations, but um, yes, and self esteem and respect are chameleon, as they should be, because if they were just rigid on just one thing that is built on a sand like foundation, because sand can turn into some form of rock, making it hard
Mm.
enough for you to think, yeah, um, if I view myself like this, then, you know, things should work out. But life is a teacher and it will meet you to say, okay, we get it, but is your foundation strong enough to push through when life does knock? And I think therein lies the issue. And without even having to mention social media, but aspirations alone. And our last episode about
Mm.
what does someone do when they are on tough times, that is when that gets revisited very quickly.
Yeah.
'Cause it's not about not letting um, you admit that you are going through the issue. It's about what are you perceiving about yourself and the
Mm.
difficulty of what you're going through to say that this is necessary or it's just life. Sometimes there's no deep thing, even if one would argue that there is, but it's just like, hey, we all go through this. But what is interchangeable, or sorry, what is changeable is um, what are you going to tell yourself in that moment to help you get through, to come out stronger? That's what this all is about. So, with when someone feels that they are at the point of no return, um, that still comes into play because, you know, one thing that I always used to marvel at is why is it that someone who does something heinous still somewhat has somewhat of a good life after the act
Hmm.
because of what they've told themselves time and time again for them to pull those things together too. And then, but perception is like, you're wrong. You don't deserve that. And he's like, yeah, well, mate, I'm not listening to you lot. So that's why I'm in the situation I am. And that's why you're in the situation you are.
But here's a question: could it just be a perception that he's living a good life?
Of course. Yes, it is. But there are cases where perception meets reality. And that's what really is the case.
Hmm. Well, if you believe, I'm sure you believe karma is real.
Man, this one, I acknowledge it heavily, but I'm very open to always learning about um, more about it. And because
Fair
I'm
enough.
open to it is why it allows me to um, not be rooted in the basic definitions of it.
Hmm.
And I think it covers a much more greater force of if um, someone does something, there's a result that comes to it. But um, someone said that a it applies to people who see themselves in a state of low self-esteem.
Karma.
Yes, i.e., um, people use it depending on their state of mind as a tool to excuse themselves for um, a level of accountability or truth that they're not willing to accept
Okay.
on everyday circumstances. Obviously, bigger the notion, then the more that's where life is saying, all right, yeah, we'll take it from here.
That's interesting. That's interesting. You go by it like that. Um. Okay, so let's put Voltaire. This the final question I want to ask. Point of no return. Just that premise alone, is that perception or reality?
It's a good question. Perception,
Mm. Yeah, I would say so.
largely.
Never too late. Well, to a degree, it's on a spectrum, but for the most part, I would say perception. It's never too late. You know.
Right. Unless you're dead, then that's reality.
Well, the perception is no longer at play at that point,
No. Well, people still talk about people when they're dead.
unless, unless they only think I'm dead. I'm
Ha!
back in state eating some chips,
Not too
some
bad. That's
tapas.
crazy.
You never know. I'm just saying. But yeah, man, this was great. This is fun. Thanks for coming along, strings, man. Always fun.
Appreciate every time. This, yeah, this is, yeah, this one. I mean, they all are, but yeah, great questions, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Gonna amp up the set. Need to turn things up. So yeah, man. Some stuff in the works. And yes, indeed, this was another live with me and Strings. I'm Alex Murdoch, the Mad Poet, and Mr. Strings Theory over there. His channel. Go catch him. And yeah, man, this is great. Till next time. Take care.